That was the time I finished typing my notes right when the timer said 1. So, hey, we're live, everybody. Do you struggle to stick with your healthy eating habits due to emotional and or stress eating? Do you wish you had a magic wand sometimes to eliminate emotional eating? Would you like to learn about some easy ways to cope with overwhelming feelings, emotions, stress, and even recent trauma? Well, stick around. This episode is for you. Today, we're going to learn 3 easy techniques to release trauma with my very, very special guest, psychotherapist and hypnotist, Randy Webb, everyone. And I'll give you a full intro here in a moment. I just got to open the show and give the medical disclaimer first. So welcome everyone to Keto Live. I am your host, Carole Freeman, Master's in Nutrition and Clinical Health Psychologist and a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I am also a board-certified ketogenic nutrition specialist, and I specialize in helping women 40 plus follow a keto diet for sustainable weight loss. And the thing the lawyers want us to do is the show is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. It's not medical advice nor intended to diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure any condition whatsoever. If you have questions or concerns related to your specific needs or medical condition, please consult your primary doctor, health care professional, and that's that. So now I get to welcome my guest, and the fun fact of my guest is I actually met him as he was my supervisor when I was getting my master's in clinical health psychology. We were required to do an internship, and so Randy was my supervisor for my internship that I did in mental health. And then he left Washington State, moved back to Arizona, and I would actually I fell in love with the Phoenix, Arizona area, come visit Randy every about 3 years. And then ironically, I moved here and he moved to the Northwest. I am down in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and he's in Portland, Oregon. But let me do the official intro here. So, Randy Webb, MACA, LMHC, is a psychotherapist of 26 years, trained by Milton H. Erickson Foundation in clinical hypnosis and strategic therapy, a master trainer in neurosequential model and caregiving, and has worked as volunteer trainer of EMDR therapy, is a certified Adobe captive specialist, and currently works for both Xion. Is it Xion or Xion?
Yeah, either one works. Yeah.
Xion Consulting, LLC of Phoenix, and as a technical training specialist for Washington State Department of Health, Olympia, Washington. Oh, that was a welcome to the show.
It's a delight to be here.
Yes, well, here we'll give you the official show welcome.
All right. Fantastic.
Those of you watching the show, this is an interactive show, so feel free to add a comment. I can see we have people live, but I can't see who you are until you share a comment. So if you want to let us know where you're joining from, we welcome you to participate in the show as well. And Randy, I had you an interview in my previous YouTube series years ago, but nobody may have watched that may be here today or listening in the future. So can you just give a little story, like how did you get into psychotherapy and hypnosis? Which one came first?
I was actually a graduate student and got into hypnosis that way. I was a graduate student at Arizona State University in Tempe. And while I was there, I had a number of professors who had kind of gotten me interested in hypnosis. And that's where I discovered the Milton H. Erickson Foundation, which is right there in Phoenix, and started taking some classes with them. And that's how that got started. So it was actually while I was in graduate school.
Okay. That's actually same thing. I did my hypnosis training while I was in grad school, and it came out of my frustration of feeling like, well, how does talking about things help people? And I remember asking one of my professors, like, he was talking us about, teaching us about talk therapy and different techniques. And I said, well, so how does this help people? And he says, that's a really good question. We've been wondering that too. And I wanted another technique. I wanted to learn something that could help facilitate healing, awareness, release of trauma in a quicker way that didn't result in, like, my own experience with therapy was you go in, you talk about stuff for an hour, and you just bawl your eyes out, and you feel so emotionally wrung out when you're done. And I was like, there's got to be a better way of helping people that they don't have to go through that. And so I found with hypnosis, I was actually seeing somebody myself. I was like, oh, this is just like, you can do really good work and not have to feel completely emotionally wrung out afterwards. So the techniques we're going to do today, just a little bit, I know they probably overlap. I'll let you kind of explain like this, but like, I'm thinking they kind of overlap both worlds of what we might think of as just psychology and psychotherapy versus like hypnosis. Can you tell us a little bit more about hypnosis and how it's not a lot of what people think it's like this stage act and it's kind of hokey, or maybe it's too woo-woo or something? Can you kind of let us know, like, what is hypnosis, and is it something that we shouldn't be so afraid of?
Well, it certainly makes sense, right? That folks have seen entertainers, that you and I know a number of folks who've done that kind of work, and it is really entertaining. It's fascinating and they know to use a number of techniques to determine to what degree a person might be suggestible. It's a very naturalistic, understandable thing. So in both cases, I guess you could say in entertainment and in a clinical sense, what we're doing is we're really trying to find out to what degree a person will focus, will concentrate in a certain way. And then through that person's focus, we can access some important things or elicit certain things about a person's values or motivations or goals or strengths or resources that are not necessarily something that a person kind of consciously, so to speak, runs an inventory through all the time. And so the way I was trained, and there are different traditions of it, but the way I was trained and the way it influenced my view of doing psychotherapy very well is it's ultimately not about the practitioner trying to take control of anybody or to force anything on anyone, despite what you see in terms of suggestibility in entertainment, like in stage hypnosis. But there are some common things there, inviting a person to focus, focus on something, inside, outside, something, but to focus. And then once focusing, we can learn a lot about eliciting or bringing out all kinds of things about a person's gifts and talents and values and motivations, maybe things that people just weren't really aware, I'll say aware of very often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I always think of hypnosis as just a deep state of relaxation. It's a natural state of our human consciousness, and it's something that we all experience, I would argue, multiple times every day. That sense of you're driving down the road and you're like, oh man, where'd the last 5 minutes go? I don't even remember that. That's what that state that we're helping people get into with that.
That's definitely the tradition I was trained in. Milton Erickson saw these hypnotic states as very natural, just like you're saying, you're driving, you walk into a room, forget why you went in there, you're doing data entry, you're washing your dishes, you're doing something repetitive. And now that I've learned with other models, including the ones that inform therapies like EMDR therapy, the eye movement therapy, just to call it something, or other forms of hypnosis, or the neurosequential model that talks about how the nervous system develops, there's something very, not only natural, but very important that people actually do things like that to unlock their gifts.
DJ Greek Goblin says he needs headphones and matching tracksuit. This guy's a baller.
Yeah, it looks like it was intentional. Like, what is the thing with the green going on there?
Well, I know, because you're a Seahawks and a Sounders fan, right? Is that?
That's definitely the case. Yeah, I'm living dangerously. I mean, I lived in Arizona for 35 years and been a Seahawks fan and live in Portland and follow the Sounders. Like, I just seem to invite trouble. And I seem to be inviting danger there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good you're back in the Northwest. They probably accept you a lot more there with your color scheme than. But I mean, Arizona is pretty forgiving because there's so many people that are transplants or snowbirds. Right. So many people from Seattle down here. So you probably were fine. They just thought like, oh, are you from Seattle? And you're like, no, I just want to live there.
Yeah, I just want to live there. I'm from Atlanta, lived here 35 years, but yeah, apparently not happy living in any particular place. Given time. He always wants to be living somewhere else. Oh well, we'll unlock some of my hubris too. Why not?
Yeah. Well, this is so I want to ask you about EMDR a little bit. We're not going to do that here today, but can you talk a little bit about like what is that? How is it developed? How does it help people?
Yeah, there's
three questions in one there.
No, that's beautiful. It's very EMDR therapy, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is a long name for a therapy that Dr. Francine Shapiro probably would have named just reprocessing therapy. And what she determined, kind of discovered accidentally back in the 80s, was that she was undergoing cancer treatment. She was having a great deal of anxiety, and she just happened to notice while she was going on a walk one day that for whatever reason, she was moving her eyes back and forth, and discovered that as she was doing that, her anxiety went down. There are a number of hypotheses as to why this bilateral stimulation, whether it's eye movement, tapping, sounds, a combination of those, and other things that we do, including like when we sleep, your eyes move back and forth while you're dreaming, for example. So it led itself to her doing a great deal of research about what is going on there that people anxiety seems to go down when she engages them in their eyes moving or tapping or sound or combination. And so she did research with veterans and survivors of traumatic experiences. And the model informing that actually has, and it's a bit controversial, a lot to do with what you and I know about the power of hypnosis, about the power of focus, about of accessing aspects, not necessarily reliving, but accessing elements of disturbing memories that may unconsciously be informing why we do some of the impulsive and kind of self-destructive things that we do.
And it's relatively recent therapy type that's been developed, but it's well researched and well respected now. When did she start to investigate this?
Well, most earnestly, I mean, she was coming across this in the late 80s, but by 1990 is when it really became EMDR. It was more than just a way of helping people desensitize like we're used to doing, helping people kind of feel safe again. But by the early 1990s, she had added the R to it, where it allowed people to talk about any thoughts, emotions, or sensations happening in the body. This is consistent with more modern integrated forms of psychotherapy, where we now know it's not just your stinking thinking and it's not just your emotions, but your body can tell us an awful lot about what is your felt sense of truth and how are you recovering. And it can reveal a lot about where you kind of sabotage. Your body can give you a lot of information. It has the last word, and some say the first and the middle word about how are you treating it. And it's giving you all kinds of warning signs as to what degree have you resolved your suffering, your memories of suffering.
Well, that you just mentioned is a really good time for me to mention and plug my my program that I have right now. It's called the Pathway to Emotional Eating. And that's part of what we're doing as part of that program, is starting to understand that your feelings or emotions are your body's language. It's trying to tell you things. And most of us never learned that language growing up because our parents didn't learn it and their parents didn't learn it. And so that's the first step in what we're learning in that program, is how do we start to listen to what our body is telling us? And just like you said, it has a lot it's trying to tell you. And most of the time, the people that are a good fit for this program, they've learned that feelings are things we shouldn't have. You should numb them out, you should avoid them, you should dissociate from them. And they've learned that food is really, really good at doing all of that. And so the first step in starting to unravel emotional eating then is to learn to accept that your body has things to tell you. And when you can listen to it, overall, your quality of life, your dis-ease in life greatly diminishes. And then your waistline can too, because you're no longer using food to cope with all of that. So thank you for that little opening to mention and plug that. So enrollment is open. I'll talk more about it at the end of this episode here. If people are interested in knowing more, I'll tell you how to get more information about that. So, all right, so Randy has 3 techniques for us today. I'm going to mention each of the names of them, and then I'll give a little intro that he's given me for each of those, and then I'll let him take over and demonstrate and explain more of that. So the 3 techniques that we're going to go over today, butterfly hug, safe, calm, magical place, and number 3 is emotional freedom technique. And so we'll start with the butterfly hug, and Randy's giving some information that this is a technique that was developed by therapist Ignacio Nacho Jarero. I'm getting better at rolling my R's, but I'm still not good at it. Lucinda Artigas to help traumatized children get reoriented right after a hurricane in Mexico. It involves making a butterfly by linking your hands together and tapping yourself slowly while breathing deeply using your diaphragm. So I'll let you take over from here. The butterfly hug, tell us more. And
Absolutely, Carole. So yeah, the butterfly hug is really a very simple technique. All these techniques have one very important thing in common. The idea is in and of themselves not necessarily to, how do I want to frame it? I would invite you not to expect it to resolve things immediately, but what it does do really well is it does prepare you to have a relationship with being present, being focused, and honoring of your body. All 3 of them are great for that, because the underlying belief in the modern trauma-informed approaches to working, not just psychotherapy, is to honor the body, be still, be present, observe, be mindful of what your body's attempting to tell you. And so the butterfly hug really has kind of 2 basic parts to it. The first of it is just breathing, filling the belly full of air so that you move the diaphragm. So it's belly breathing, right? And you can learn that in things like meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong and guided imagery. There are a lot of practices where, like in yoga, where you're filling the belly full of air instead of just, we're frequently breathing very shallowly. You're filling the belly full of air. You can breathe in through the nose and out the mouth. You can add little details to it about where to put your tongue when you're breathing in, maybe behind your top teeth when you're breathing in, and behind your bottom teeth when you're breathing out, or breathing in a certain number of seconds, holding and exhaling. All of that's wonderful. But the basic idea is to fill the belly full of air like this. So it's very basic. That's the first part. And you can add whatever nuance to that you want. The goal is to be still and breathe, right? And you've probably been told that one in many different ways as part of many practices. Now, the second part to the butterfly hug is to apply the butterfly itself. Doesn't really matter whether you are tapping slowly like this on your arms, for example, your upper arms, that's fine. But if you want to make it more like a butterfly, to give yourself that effect of being mindful of what you're doing with your own body, you run your hands together, link at the thumbs, and create the wings of the butterfly. So here's what that looks like again. So you're just linking. Yeah, there you got it. Now, if they don't link, that's not the end of the world either. Place it just right over here, on what are called the sore points, like an emotional freedom technique or thought field therapy. So you can just massage, or you can tap. A lot of people find, like these little kids where they first tried it, find the tapping to be easiest. So now breathing in, just like we practiced. There's no limit. There's no limit.
Like pat your head and your tummy at the same time.
It's a bit like, it's kind of like that. It may take a little practice for you to get used to doing those things at the same time. But that's the basic idea about it. The goal is just to focus and be present and honor and listen to the body. Now, we recommend that you not go too fast, because here's what those of us who've been trained in things like thought field therapy and brain spotting and emotional freedom technique and accelerated resolution therapy, the more modern, in a sense, not quite talk therapy. It's not so much about talking, it's about observing and accessing the body. What we find, interestingly, is if you go really fast, it'll tend to bring stuff up, and you may not really want at that moment to be bringing stuff up. So that's butterfly hug. You can practice it as much as you like.
Yeah, where like this is more like in your state of fluttering, this would not be as common as the very slow.
Right. Exactly.
Now, does it matter at all if you're doing them alternating or like you're flapping like a butterfly at the same time, or?
You could experiment with it. It's been my experience anecdotally that it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference, but yeah, you could experiment and see which one kind of gives you the best effect.
Yeah, and there are probably a lot of theories of why it's calming, and like you said, part of it just focusing you on right now and what you're doing in this moment in your body, instead of we tend to get worried about what if, the future or the past, and when we can focus in the moment, it's very calming, very soothing. I wanted to add too, okay, so we mentioned trauma, releasing trauma from the body, and I wanted to clarify that a trauma doesn't necessarily have to be trauma with a capital T, where it's like things we would think of as like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to that person or that child. Trauma can be little t things. It's all about your perspective, or your perspective, your reaction to whatever happened to you at the time. And so a lot of times as little children, our brain's not fully formed, and we may make an opinion of something that happened that, so for example, like you got out of soccer practice and it's pouring down rain, and for some reason, maybe there was mixed up signal between mom and dad and they forgot to pick you up. That can be a traumatic experience, even though nobody purposely hurt you, and there may have been another child that went through the same thing and was like, cool, I can go play with my friends and I don't care that nobody picked me up. So that there can be things like that traumatic, or that encode in the brain as trauma, that are not what you may think of as trauma, like molestation or abuse or things like that too. So I wanted to add in that all of us have some traumas in our past, whether we have trauma with big T's or little T's, we all have them.
Yeah, no question. In fact, one of the things, had I not already learned it in a number of different ways, by the time I was working with Bruce Perry and the folks with the neurosequential model initiative and project, boy, that is really borne out there too, very much so, Carole. All of us have been exposed to long periods of being disrespected or mistreated or excluded, or felt bullied or felt alone, or lived in circumstances where there was violence in our neighborhoods, or we might have been kind of looked down upon and discriminated. And so it can come in many, many forms. And unfortunately, when people kind of get in the pattern of doing hurtful things to themselves, and they develop habits that are kind of self-destructive, they're making memories like that as well. So it's good to kind of get a handle on those things. So you can kind of take your power back. It's really wonderful. Yeah.
So I wanted to basically share that these techniques are for everyone. We all need these things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everyone benefits from the many, many ways that we have of doing this, no doubt.
Okay, so that was butterfly hug. Do you all feel comfortable with doing that? The next one that Randy has for us is the safe/calm/magic, and it's a technique developed. My internet is being a little spotty, so I hope I'm not for people here going. A technique developed by traumatherapist and innovator Francine Shapiro that helps to be present with all your senses, and then tapping yourself to strengthen your affirmations and gifts. And this is at my hypnotherapy training. We learned this as the way of starting out every session. So take it away.
Yeah, it's wonderful, Carole. The safe, calm place, magical place, goes by different names, is like the butterfly hug, a technique that practitioners use to prepare people for the really heavy duty work that they'll do to resolve their memories of suffering. But we tend to end sessions using something very much like it, and things like it too. And so very much so, because we want to make sure, we want to give you a transition from the work you're doing, whether it's talk therapy or one of the other therapies. We want to give you a transition so you go out there, and function in the world, to safely drive home, go about your business. And after you've done that hard work. And so Safe Calm Place is a beautiful, beautiful exercise to both build resources and to kind of help you manage stress, right? The stressors that you face. And it essentially is wonderful in that it's imaginary. So a piece of it might look something like this. And it might remind you of what we do with the different forms of clinical hypnosis, very, very similar. So it might look like this, for example. We might say, but it involves taking your senses into account. So it may sound like this. So I would like you, with your eyes open or your eyes closed, or somewhere in between, to think of a place where it feels good just to be. And as you're there, you can see those sights, different colors and hues, the way the light is reflected off of objects. You might notice whether you're alone or with other people. You can notice shapes. And because you're noticing, you may begin to notice sound, and you can hear those sounds, some close, some perhaps farther away, or in between. And as you do that, you can become aware, to the degree that you choose to, certain smells, and sense you're there in this place where it feels so good to just be. You can enjoy those scents and fragrances. And as you do that, something almost invites you to become aware of tastes. And you can savor those tastes. And as you become aware of that, you might begin to consider sensations on the surface of the body and underneath. And you can enjoy being in this place, maybe even in ways that we haven't even thought yet, noticing the time of year, memories, activities and situations you anticipate. And as you focus on how good it feels to just be in this place, I'd like you to think of a name for it, as this place can be real or imaginary, or a combination. And I'd like you to think of a word or a phrase in such a way that if you were to see it, or hear it, or say it, or write it, you can remember how good it feels to be in this place. And when you have that word or phrase, I'd like you to just give yourself the butterfly tap, the butterfly hug, just thinking of how it feels to be in that place. And you can do this as long as you like. And whenever you need to remember to be in that place that feels so good, you can just think of your word or phrase. There you have it. That is a sample of the calm, safe place or magical place.
I'm going to be so relaxed at the end. How was that for those of you watching? Is anybody else relaxing, feeling calm and peaceful? Also, if you feel like you want to share what your place was or your phrase that you came up with, feel free to do so in the comments. Love it. Love it. I do a similar one to that I with my clients. I teach them how to take I call it a mental vacation. Sounds a little safer. Sometimes people are resistant to thinking about hypnosis. And so the key, and so if you're going to do this yourself, here's the key, everyone, is you got to think of your 5 senses. So as you walk through where you're at with yourself, is bring in, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? And what do you feel? And that's the trick of doing this for yourself, is bringing all of your sensory experience into that moment.
That's what's so cool about it, is you can record, you could create your own script, for example, what you want to say, bringing in your senses, and you could record yourself, or maybe someone else, or it could be part of the work you do with Carole as well. And you could just play it over and over again. Yeah, you could practice it as much as you like.
All right. And technique 3 that Randy's going to walk us through is the emotional freedom technique, which is a method probably derived most from the first evidence-based energy therapy called thought field therapy by psychologist Roger Callahan. I don't have to roll any R's on that name. And, which involves tapping at various points of our energy centers or meridians in the body while making affirmations. So Randy, tell us more about this.
Well, EFT, emotional freedom technique, uses tapping like thought field therapy, and thought field therapy like EMDR therapy, and a number of these therapies is an evidence-based therapy. So they've been well researched, and many studies supporting that people get good outcomes with them, right? And so this one involves tapping more than anything else. And if you wanted to learn more about it, there's some really great things out there in the internet, including a website called Tap Into Heaven. That's really wonderful, where you could learn more about the technique. But it's a cousin of thought field therapy. Here's how this one works, and it has some elements from the first 2 techniques we showed you. It involves making affirmations. So you can think of an affirmation like, and I'm going to give you an example. And so for this protocol, there actually is a lot I can share with you. I'm going to demonstrate this whole particular protocol. And so there are a number of steps to it. And you get to kind of experiment with it. But here's what it looks like. And of course, I'll leave it up to Carole to show you all a little bit more about this too, and share some ideas. But here's what it looks like. There's the setup. You might remember with the butterfly hug, I was mentioning this area called the sore spot. This is one area we can use for the first part. There are kind of 4 parts to this thing. So one part of it is just get in the habit of massaging your sore spot. It's kind of like this fleshy area right about here on either side of your sternum. It's kind of in this kind of upper area here, kind of heading towards your arms. It's kind of fleshy, right in that area there, in the upper part of your chest. So you can practice massaging that while making an affirmation. Now, if you don't want to do that, according to the protocol, you get a similar effect by tapping on the percussion end of your hand. Kind of like if you were going to chop something with a karate chop or something. You can just tap the end of your hand if you would prefer to do that. You do that while making an affirmation. So you can pick either one of these, whatever one you want to use, while you make an affirmation that goes like this. For example, even though I have this whatever the concern is, or the worry, or the stress, or it could be, there's no limit to what it can be. It's generating and triggering in you a certain reaction, right? Maybe you're feeling worried or anxious. For example, even though I have this issue, concern, problem, whatever it may be, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. Or, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. So that's the first part. The second part involves a great deal of tapping. So bear with me. This is the kind of thing you want to practice over and over again. So you're making the affirmation. You don't necessarily have to say it out loud for a lot of reasons. The important thing is you're thinking it. Even though I have this concern, so at the edge of your eyebrow, like this, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then, right here at the edge of your eye, this is difficult with glasses on, I'll tell you. Maybe I'm going to take my glasses off, even though I'm not seeing very well. I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I have this concern, or whatever it is, you're just thinking this. You don't have to say it. We're thinking it about 5 times. Tapping about 5 times or so, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then here, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then here, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then right about here, right about in this area, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then we're not done yet with the tapping. We keep on going. Now we're going to go on the hand. Even though I have this at the edge of the thumb, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. The edge of the index finger, even though I have, you don't have to hold your hand up like I'm doing. The important thing is you're tapping it. I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I have, middle finger now, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. Skipping the ring finger, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now tapping the end, even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. So you're doing all this affirming and tapping, but guess what? We're not done yet. There's more tapping to be done. So now, while tapping this, what's called the gamut point, this crease in between your ring finger and your pinky, it's this crease here. Just tapping there now, thinking of your affirmation. Even though I have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now, close your eyes and continue tapping. Then open them. Then look hard down to the right on the floor. Just make your eyes look down there while tapping. Now hard down to the floor left, right? And then roll your eyes in a circle in one direction. And now while tapping, roll your eyes in another direction while tapping. And then hum a song, I don't know, for 5 seconds. Right? To be happy birthday. Count from 1 to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I should still be tapping. Then, or in English or Spanish or whatever language you want. And then hum 5 seconds of the song again. Take a breath. And then take a measurement from 0 to 10. How much is the concern getting to you? How much disturbance do you feel? So we call those subjective units of disturbance, right? And if you find that it's something other than 0 or as low as you want to go, guess what? Let's start again. Even though I continue to have this concern, I deeply and completely accept myself. And you go through all that whole sequence again. And what we find is, boy, will you ever get mindful and pay really close attention to what and you'll have your body talking to you, and it's going. And then you might find that you're starting to get focused and centered. And it works really, really well. That's a lot of steps, right? It's kind of like, okay, I need to practice that a lot to kind of get the handle of that.
Yeah. Or I'm sure there is a YouTube tutorial that walks you through all the steps. I remember reading about this probably in the 90s, back before the internet really was that easy to access and get a lot of information. I remember reading a book about it, and all the places that they described, I was like, is it here? Is it there? Is it there? Where exactly? Like, it seemed like it needed to be in the perfect place.
It's got to be right there.
Yeah, and I was just like, all right, I don't even know if I'm doing it right. And,
right, am I tapping at the exact
what if I
right
do it
space?
here, but not here? And then what happens if you tap your ring finger? You said we had to skip that.
Oh, I know it. And yeah, what is that going to do? Right?
I know. And then I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Is there anything more to it than a very elaborate distraction technique?
I think supposedly there is. In fact, at least in terms of the outcomes with field therapy. Now, does that necessarily apply because it works so well in thought field therapy, and Callahan and his people studied it so closely? Does that just magically apply to EFT? I would doubt it, but I would say that speaking in terms of someone doing the kind of exercises we do with clinical hypnosis, at the very least, it's fantastic distraction, right? At the very least.
Well, if I was going to design a study, I don't know if they've done it this way, but I would do that whole protocol that we just did, and I would do the same affirmation, but just tapping random spots, like other spots that are the wrong spots. Tap your toe, tap your ear, and then see if there was a measurable difference. So.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah,
I think it's perfectly reasonable. Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of breaking away from emotional eating habits, a lot of it can be really effective. Just getting a space between an urge to do it and actually acting on it. And so, even if all that it is an elaborate distraction technique, that is really powerful at decreasing urges to do something. So. I'll play the skeptic there and acknowledge that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I think one of the things too that folks who practice the different trauma therapies, for example, I've seen practitioners who will get into things like there are different schools of thoughts about hypnosis, obviously, and there are different schools of thought about EMDR therapy and accelerated resolution therapy and somatic experiencing and brain spotting, and some of those have more of an evidence base than others, but there are certain things that they have in common. And ultimately what we tend to find is, while that may or may not matter a lot to the practitioners, it really doesn't tend to matter much to the people who are really seeking help, who are self-sabotaging, who are not content with the way that their bodies are acting the way they are, and they have a number of complaints, and they just, if it winds up being therapeutic, I think they tend to say, well, that's great, you can offer me all kinds of hypotheses as to why that worked, but boy, if it's working, that's what really matters most to me.
Well, it goes along the lines with something they taught us in my nutrition clinical rotations, was that if somebody comes in and ask for a certain supplement because they heard that their friend was taking it or they heard it was good for them, that we were supposed to go ahead, as long as it was safe, go ahead and recommend, oh yeah, I think you should try that, because they likely will get some benefit because they think they will get benefit from it, even if it wasn't something they necessarily needed. So
I respect that a great deal. It's very powerful. I mean, we know that part of the belief, the hope, the expectation that things can be helpful, it's been backed up too. Scott Miller and his people have shown for a long time that the relationship is what best accounts for the variance and the outcomes. And if people have a belief that, hey, you know what, I'm working with Carole Freeman, I trust Carole as a professional, and I get the sense that Carole gets me, I believe we can get good outcomes and results together. You tend to get them. Is what we tend to see.
Linda Sumi is here, and she says, interesting. So glad you're here, Linda. Glad you're enjoying it. I'm going to ask, so let's see. How would somebody know if they should seek out therapy? Like what, because I think there's a lot of stigma with it still that, oh, you have to have something really wrong with you. Like in my family, they say, I'm the one with the problems. I need to go get, no, they're pointing at me. I'm the one should go get therapy. I had therapy. But what are some good times to seek out therapy? And also unfortunately, the last couple of years, a lot of our therapists are very overworked. And so it might be difficult at this time to actually easily get help. But what are some things that maybe stuck patterns in people's lives that may indicate that seeking out some therapy may be helpful?
I think it's a fantastic question, Carole. And I would say that among many different possibilities is the one that stands out the most is if you find that you're over or under reacting to something that's going on. We know we all have stress and we all have histories of memories of suffering. We know those things are in play. The pandemic revealed a lot of this, I think, for a lot of people, including those of us in the helping professions. And so if you find that you're overreacting, like you kind of blow up, like you have these big energetic reactions to something that's going on, maybe something somebody said, for example, and you tend to kind of shut down and dissociate. You kind of leave your body. You're not all there. Those are, you're not emotionally available to people. You kind of notice that you're kind of spending a lot of your time not really living life, but you're just kind of reacting to things all the time. I think that's the best single indication that you have something that not necessarily, like Carole said, like you said, Carole, it's not necessarily some big T thing that you remember or something, a major event in your life necessarily, or a series of major events, but they could be things that are just not quite resolved yet. And they're kind of influencing you in the present. They're kind of informing how you kind of blow up and overreact to certain situations. And you may feel bad about it later. You may go, oh boy, I really overreacted that, or I wasn't available, or I wasn't really present, or I didn't really listen, or I didn't really take heed, I really wasn't emotionally available for someone. Then those are indications that maybe if it's really giving you a lot of grief, and it shows up in your relationships, it can show up in your work performance, but boy, you can surely bet in some form or another, and you can take this to the bank, it will show up in your body and how you treat it. So that's how, if you find you're using, you're kind of showing certain addictive patterns. And let's face it, I think Carole is certainly defer to you in this, being a subject matter expert as it relates to nutrition, but let's face it, our addictions show up in how we eat and how we treat our bodies. And if it's so severe and it's really, really stubborn, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be in therapy for years. It might be something relatively manageable, whether with a traditional talk therapy where it's really the relationship and you just need to be heard and validated, or it could be something where it's more integrated and it involves not necessarily, we don't ask you to relive stuff, but there may be certain pieces of something back there to where we just need a little sample of it, help you reprocess it in a safe environment, and then now its influence has gone down. So that would be my recommendation for people to consider.
Nice. And are you doing any work that you're seeing clients at all now, or?
Not at the moment. I've been really busy primarily training clinicians, but I do anticipate in the next few months of maybe in the next month or two, actually seeing folks again. There for a while during the pandemic, I was seeing people through telehealth and was really enjoying that. And I may do some more of that again, but I may try to see people in person too. Of course, the nature of my license is such that I've got to do that within the the boundaries of the state of Washington, but there I do have a very, very wide access and network of practitioners. Almost no matter where you live, unless you're calling in from Kazakhstan or something.
Okay.
might be a little stretch there, but
well, normally I like to share my guests' information for people to get more support if they want. But we'll do this. If you have, if you're looking for a specific type of therapist in a certain area, add a comment on YouTube or Facebook, and then I'll tag Randy in that and let him share some other resources to get you some more help. And then when you are seeing people again, I'll add that information to our show notes.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so if those of you listening, watching now or in the future, if you want to know more about how to end emotional eating, as I mentioned, my program is now open through enrollment closes actually on June 19th, and we're limiting it to 20 spaces. And I do have 4 or 5 spots are already taken in this program. So it is called the Pathway to End Emotional Eating, and it is a program that I have specifically designed to help people develop the skills they need to start to have healthy emotional expression, be comfortable with having emotions and feelings without needing to turn to food to soothe, numb, or dissociate from those feelings. Now, it's highly influenced by the DBT training that I had with, I don't remember the clinician's training name, but the lady was trained under Marsha Linehan, that I got the training while I was at whatever that place was that we worked together. I don't know if we should name it or not, but Navos. But so I got that training there, and it influenced how I see people experiencing emotions and feelings, and then the urge to use food to cope with that. And so my program is based on that. And so it does bring in the 4 different parts. Actually, we focus on 3 of the parts of DBT. So mindfulness, emotional regulation skills, and distress tolerance. We don't go as much into the interpersonal effectiveness, which is about how to communicate with other people, as much in this program. And so if you'd like to know more about this, if you feel like this is something that you would like to start to begin to tackle so that you can stick with your eating habits, I do coach people on keto, but this program is dietary agnostic. So it is not about what you eat at all. And so it can be effective for any eating protocol. If you just feel like you're out of control with your eating habits and you would like to make healthier choices and stop turning to food to cope with emotions and stress, then reach out, send an email. Let's see if I've got the banner here I can add. Send an email to this email, support@ketocarole.com, and we will get you some more information about that. And again, if you're listening in the future, if it's after June 19th, 2022, send an email anyway, and we'll put you on the wait list for the next version of that. And so next week's episode, I'm going to be talking about yo-yo dieting. Why is it that we can lose weight, but we always gain more back? And so today's episode, I want to thank Randy for being here and teaching us about the butterfly hug, the safe, calm, magical place, and emotional freedom technique, and everything else that you've shared with us. Thank you, Randy, for being here. Let's get the clappy hands again.
Yay! It was a delight.
Yeah. Is there anything else you were hoping I would ask about or you'd like to share before we wrap this all up?
I would just add one other thing is your program sounds wonderful. Dialectical behavior therapy is a beautiful evidence-based practice, and it's often used in conjunction with other trauma therapies. And the developer herself was in recovery, had any number of things to resolve that were informing her relationships and how she treated herself. So that is, folks, that is rock solid evidence-based stuff backing that kind of learning and learning opportunity. So that is just tremendous programming.
It's over delivering for the price for sure. So, and maybe we'll have to talk about having, some of the stuff that you've taught here, Randy, is some of the bonuses for the program. You actually gave me some ideas of things that I can include as bonuses for the program to help entice people to join us. It includes both learning programs, so that's a 8-week program where you get 6 weekly 6 lessons to go through at your own pace. And then we have 8 weeks group support as well too. So it's really kind of I'm giving them too much with it, but
that's outstanding.
This will be the second time I'm running this program, and I just had so many people reaching out earlier this year saying, when are you going to run that program? And I think I really need it. And you know what? A lot of people ate their way through the pandemic, and I think people are ready to unravel all that now and just get back to being a healthier version of themselves. So
good.
Yeah, so if you're struggling with keto, I'm here to help. Reach out, visit my website, ketocarole.com, and support the show by leaving us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on. And remember, help us grow the show, and we'll help you shrink. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Randy, for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye now.